Today, I want to talk about meaning. And in particular, I want to talk about, I've spent a lot of time thinking about where meaning comes from. I got into college back in the 1960s 'and as a philosophy student, and I was interested in the meaning of life. And my colleagues say, you like the university so much you never left, and you're still trying to figure out the meaning of life. But I'm not going to talk about the meaning of life, because I don't know what that is. I'm going to talk about how humans make meaning. And in particular, here's what I'm going to argue. I'm going to say that meaning reaches down into the depths of our bodily engagement with our world. And I'm going to claim that if we're going to talk about meaning, we have to focus on what has traditionally been known as the aesthetic dimensions of experience. And the problem is this. In Europe, in the Enlightenment, you got a notion of the aesthetic as a certain kind of experience, and Kant defined it as a judgment that can be none other than subjective. And what happens is, you think of aesthetics as having to do with feelings, and you think of feelings as subjective, and so they're not part of thought or cognition or knowledge, and they get thrown off to the side. What I'm trying to argue, can we get that back out? Bummer, as we say in the States. I'll go on while he's working on this. What I'm trying to argue is that aesthetics is not about the experience of art. That aesthetics pertains to everything that goes into meaning. And what is it that goes into meaning? Form, pattern, images, qualities of situations, feelings, emotions. So I'm actually going to claim that instead of marginalizing or pushing off to the side aesthetics, we need an aesthetics of human meaning. Let's see if we can get, let me see if I can get this back up. Again. So, let me say what a disembodied philosophy is. A disembodied philosophy says basically you can give an account of mind and thought and meaning without any reference to the body. And so this is a view that says what makes us distinctive as human beings is we have minds. And then they go on to say mind is the seat of our reason, our thinking, our capacity for meaning. And then they say that you can account for all of this without reference to the body. So that's the view I'm arguing against. I'm saying that's completely wrong and backwards. And first generation cognitive science, I bring cognitive science to bear on thinking about language and meaning and value. First generation cognitive science was built on a view that the mind was a computer program. And so the mind is the software or the program that can be run on any suitable hardware. And if you've got that view, you think that mind is just a program, a set of processes, and it doesn't have anything to do with the body. But I'm a member of a group that works in what's called second generation cognitive science. And everything I'm saying today is based on what I'm about to say right now. That the starting point of meaning is what? It's an organism, in this case a human organism, in ongoing interaction with an environment or a situation. That's the world. And that environment is physical, it's interpersonal, it's social, and it's cultural. And that if we're going to understand how meaning's possible, we have to look at how organisms interact with their environment. This is what second generation cognitive science does. So it's an embodied philosophy. It's going to look at meaning as coming bottom up from our bodily, physical engagement with the environment. So I'm saying the human being is a process of interaction. You're not locked up yourself. It's not locked up in this. And it's not out there in the world. It's in the interaction between the environment and you as an organism. Okay, enough of the high-flying philosophy stuff. So, where does this all start with? And this is my granddaughter, and when she's 4 months old. And I'm going to play a little clip of the little sweetie. Let's see. And look what she does, 4 months old. She starts moving her arms and legs sort of wildly. Oh, what's this? She's got her toe in her mouth. She doesn't know toe from schmo, but oh, this is kind of interesting. She's sampling her environment. And now look how happy she is. She moves her arms. Her legs go all over the place. That's just life, animation. That's what it is to be alive. The joy of just being alive. Look at that. Isn't she cute? Now, she says, "Oh, what's this?" She doesn't know red from anything, but what's this over here? Okay. Oh, let's have a little more action. Now, here's what I'm saying. I'm saying it all starts from there. It all starts from having a body that interacts with its environment. And as she gets older, she's now 11 months old, as she gets older, she's going to coordinate her bodily movements with her environment. So, let me explain how I'm going to think about this, how I'm going to think about meaning. I want to talk about J.J. Gibson, the perceptual psychologist's notion of an affordance. So an affordance is something in the environment affords you, as an organism, a possibility for interacting with it. So take a bottle. This bottle is an object, and given the way my body is made, my perception, my motor capacities, my needs, this bottle affords me, Gibson would say, affords me certain ways of interacting with it. It affords graspability. I can hold on to it. I can twist the top off. I can drink from it. All right? So what is the bottle as an object? What is its meaning? And what I'm saying today is the meaning of the bottle is its affordances for you. So, one of my colleagues at the University of Oregon is a neuroscientist, and here's how he says this. He says, look, we don't have these discrete faculties for music appreciation or for thinking. Rather, what we do is we recruit our bodily processes of perception, of motion, and of feeling. We recruit those to do our thinking. And I'm not going to go through the details of this. I want to move on to the more interesting stuff. So what is embodied meaning? I'm claiming that meaning doesn't drop down from above. Meaning works its way up for us through our bodily engagement with an environment. And what do I mean by meaning? I claim that the meaning of anything, whether it be a bottle, or a person, or language, linguistic items, or a dance, the meaning of that, I'm claiming, is what it affords you by way of possible experience. And that experience can be things that have gone past, or things that are present now, or things that are future. So it's part of the meaning of this bottle that in the future I can drink from it. And in the present I can drink from it. Or I could throw it at somebody. That's all part of the meaning of it as a cluster of affordances. So my philosophical hero is John Dewey, and he says, objects in the world are events with meaning. Now, most meaning is not consciously entertained. We know this from cognitive science, and different cognitive scientists will give you different figures, but something like 90% of the thinking that goes on and the meaning that goes on, you're not aware of consciously, because it's your body processing its environment and its affordances. So I want to say an embodied view of meaning is naturalistic, because it says that we don't have a split self with a higher mind and a lower body. We are fundamentally embodied creatures, and so all the meaning we're capable of, all the activities we can do with mind, are emergent properties of our natural being in the world. Okay, now I'm going to give you some examples of that. Back in the 1980s, George Lakoff and I we were asking, how could meaning be embodied? Where could it come from? Well, you know, now, based on what I've said today, you should see what the story is for me. I'm going to ask, what does my environment afford me, a being like me? And I'm going to say it affords certain patterns of interaction, and I called those image schemas. So think of it, most of us in this room can stand up, maybe not all at this point, I don't know, stand up, and we experience the world in terms of verticality relations. So verticality becomes a fundamentally important meaning structure for us that's the result of the way our bodies are and the way our environments are. We project verticality onto things. We project up, down, and front, back. People in this room know this well because we study languages all over the world. You know that all languages have ways and means of recording these fundamental image schema structures, like front, back, and things like near and far, on top of, below. Those are the kinds of structures I'm saying that are the source of meaning. Now, it's a critical part of my view that these image schemas have a logic. Because I'm going to claim that logic doesn't drop down on us from some Phrygian or Husserlian heaven. Rather, logic is the logic of our bodily experience. So let's take something like containment. What is containment? it suggests that you have a bounded area and you have an exterior and an interior. It's that simple. But containment has a logic. So, for example, here's a pencil. And the pencil is in my hand. And my hand now is in my pocket. And my pocket is in my pants. And my pants are in this room. And this room is in St. Petersburg. So where is this pencil? It's in St. Petersburg. And that is bodily containment. And my granddaughter is about to learn the logic of bodily containment because she's getting to the age where she'll take these little cups, that nest inside of one another, and she'll learn that this can fit into this and that. And I just came from the Netherlands at an institute for the deafblind, and we were looking at deafblind learning the meaning of a container. And if we have time, I'll tell you about that. But it was, it was an amazing experience for me to see this one young man feeling a plastic container and then realizing that, what full and empty meant, that sort of thing. So I'm saying we learn the logic of containment. So you know that if something is in an object, and that object's in something else, then the first object is in the third object. All right, in the container. And there's a name for that in logic. It's called transitivity. And so these highfalutin logical notions have their meaning in and through our bodies. All right, so many people say, okay, Johnson, that was fine. You've got, of course, when we're talking about perceptual things, and we're talking about concrete objects, you're going to have this kind of body stuff going on. But that's not true for abstraction. So what are we going to say about abstract concepts? And our basic answer to that is, we think that most abstract concepts are defined by metaphors. And what the metaphor does is it takes what we call a source domain, like vision, and it uses the source domain and the logic of the source domain, its image schema structure, and we project that to constitute our understanding of something abstract. And that's what we mean by a conceptual metaphor. And we're now working on a neural account of it. I mean, I've said that these metaphors are based upon correlations in experience between the source domain, like vision, and the target domain, like understanding or knowing. And so we have expressions like, I see what you mean. Well, that's a metaphor, and it's tied to an underlying metaphor system of understanding is seeing. So a guy named Joe Grady, several years ago, was looking at these metaphors that Lakoff and I had been analyzing, and now a lot of other people in languages around the world, and he said, where do these metaphors really come from? So he formulated an idea that he calls primary metaphor. And he says, look, we learn these just by living, by having experiences where what we call the source domain is connected to the target domain. So here's an example. All right? This is my granddaughter, Sophia, that you saw. Here she is. And I'm holding her, and what does she experience? She experiences warmth and my affection. That's an That's an experiential connection between warmth and affection. And that's the basis for a primary metaphor. Affection is warmth. So you'll say something like, well, I got to St. Petersburg, and at first the audience was kind of cold to me. It was chilly. But as I kept talking, they started to warm up to me. Well, that's the affection is warmth metaphor. And we're claiming it has a bodily grounding. Intimacy is closeness, is another one. So you'll say, who will Putin allow to be close to him? Why do we say close? What does close mean? Well, it may mean physically close, but it may mean in terms of intimacy, or closely connected with him on a social level. That's a metaphor, but it comes from the fact It's grounded in the fact that we experience intimacy when we're together, when we're close. Here's another one I like. Bad is stinky. So we have various disgust reactions to rotting meat and things, and they stink. And it's that kind of experiential correlation, and it's a neural correlation and neural connections that get activated at the same time. They become the basis for things like you say, everything Johnson said stinks. Finally, I have to mention this one. There are maybe a couple of hundred or more of these primary metaphors. This one is really important because what it says is, take any physical object. It will have a structure. And that structure is key to its organization for us functionally. So we get that correlation between physical structure and organizational function gives us the basis for a metaphor we have, and we can think of any abstract structure as though it were a physical structure. So in mathematics, we think of all these abstract entities metaphorically as if they were physical entities. So that's the basic idea. And we're saying that's how we get abstraction, from the body. It's not disembodied. Its whole logic and its meaning comes out of our embodiment. Now, a lot of people have spent a lot of time over the last 20 years trying to get evidence for these conceptual metaphors. And there are now something like 10 different sources. One of the best people on this is Raymond Gibbs. And Gibbs is a psychologist at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And he was trying to figure out, do we really have a metaphor, desire is hunger? And notice, desire is hunger. Well, why is that a metaphor? You say hunger is a kind of desire. But the reason it's a metaphor is because hunger is one kind of desire, and you can use that source domain to understand desire in general. So this is just a fun example I thought I'd read to you of a woman in his class and asking, to talk about her desire for this boy. She says, back in high school, I had this huge crush on this guy, James, who was a total hunk. He would flirt with me when we'd talk, but I didn't get a chance to know him very well, never mind ever be alone with him. I was dying to get closer to him and felt starved for his attention. I walked around for 5 months feeling silly and empty because I wanted him so bad. I wanted to eat him alive. He was yummy. Now that's pretty extreme, but that is the metaphor, desire is hunger, enacted. And what he did was studied Brazilian, Portuguese, and a couple of other languages as well as English to see if in fact we really did reason in terms of this metaphor. Okay. So I want to mention one other kind of evidence that I think is really very nice and powerful, and that's spontaneous gesture. The psychologist David McNeil is most famous in a book called Hand and Mind, and then a later book called Gesture and Thought. He's now created a whole field of gesture study where he argues that there are basically 3 kinds of gestures, and I just want to mention these to you. So think of this space between me and you as my gestures, my space of interaction, All right. Now, beat gestures take place down here, on the margins of this window of interaction that I have with you. And I'll say something like, with a beat gesture, you really ought to pay attention to what I'm saying now. So it kind of parses what I'm saying. It's for emphasis. Those are beat gestures. Then there are didactic gestures where you point to something. But iconic gestures are interesting. And the example I saw in David McNeil's lab was he had I don't know if you know this cartoon from old days in America. It's called Sylvester and Tweety Bird. Sylvester is a cat and Tweety Bird is a Tweety Bird, a little canary. And so they had children watch this cartoon and then tell them what happened, and they go like this. So Sylvester was climbing up the downspout, and Tweety Bird took a bowling ball and dropped it down the downspout, and he went down the bottom. Okay, that's an iconic gesture. You actually have similarity or sameness of structure or form being realized. Now, notice something. The children do this. Sylvester was climbing up the downspout. Why don't they do climbing up the downspout? They don't. They do this. Why? Because they're representing the container that is the downspout. And then when they say Tweety Bird dropped a bowling ball down, they don't say Tweety Bird dropped a bowling ball down. They go Tweety Bird dropped it, because bowling balls are solid objects. That's iconic. Finally, metaphoric gestures. And there's a huge body of evidence that these gestures occur prior to your spoken language. So they're not just ways of expressing what you can say with words. And here's an example. You could say, take that girl we just heard about. What if she goes like this? Well, I couldn't decide whether to go out with James or not. Like, on the one hand, he was really a hunk. What a good-looking guy. But on the other hand, he was dumb as a stone. Now, what is the metaphor there? We know this metaphor. It's deciding or judging is weighing. And that's a fundamental metaphor. You weigh your options before you act. And notice, a dancer pointed out to me after he heard me give this example. We talked, and he came up and showed me some things in dance routine. And he showed me that if you say, notice when you're weighing, you're not moving forward, see? You're just weighing prior to acting. And then you move forward as a dancer in the sagittal plane, and you act. So, as I said, now we have something like 10 different kinds of evidence that these conceptual metaphors are real. They're not just matters of words, but they exist in all forms of expression, symbolic expression. Now, I want to talk about two more things and then I'll stop. The next thing I want to say something about very briefly is emotion. Because I believe that emotion is a fundamental part of human meaning and it doesn't get talked about very often. And so I'm using the work of Antonio Damasio, who's written several important books. And basically, here's what Damasio says. I'm going to try to put this as simply as I can. It's a pretty complex view. What do you have to do to survive as an organism? You have to create a boundary, which is your flesh, and this is for us. And it has to be permeable so that energy can come in and waste can go out. And within that boundary, you have to maintain the conditions of life. There's nothing more meaningful to you than that. Everything has to start from that. Without that, you're dead. Forget meaning. So, what do? The body has to maintain homeostasis, a kind of balance within. And so if my temperature gets to be 107 degrees Fahrenheit, I will die. So our bodies are attuned to reading how their environment is affecting them and making changes. And those changes that are made involve what he calls emotions or emotional response patterns. All right? So what he's saying is, all along, we are measuring how our encounters with our environment go. We're measuring the affordances of our environment. You can see where I'm going with this. We're getting meaning. And we're not necessarily doing this consciously. Most of it's unconscious. If it had to be conscious all the time, you'd never get anything done, because it'd be too much to take account of. So, emotions happen as responses the body makes to alter the environment or the body in response to some perceived situation in the environment. And then Damasio says, sometimes you feel those emotions. And so notice, emotion and feeling are not the same thing. And you can have an emotion without feeling it. So I say to you, what are you so angry about? And you say, me? I'm not angry. But you were, because you were manifesting these facial and body posture gestures of anger. So, but you hadn't felt your anger yet. So feeling emotion and having an emotion are fundamentally distinct. Now, what I'm saying about this is, if we want an account of meaning, if I had more time, which I don't, if we wanted a rich account of meaning, we would need to talk about all of these aspects of embodiment that I'm just hinting at. And I've left another one out that's terribly important, but it's too big a story to tell, and that is qualities. We'd have to talk about the fact that human life is a matter of qualities that we experience. The redness of a ripe cherry, the redness of a sunset, the redness of your lover's lips, the redness of blood pouring from a wound. Those are different rednesses. Those qualities make up our lives. And meaning emerges in and through the qualities of our existence. So I'm trying to say, look, aesthetics has always been about all the things I've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. Aesthetics has always been about feeling, emotion, form, images, imagination, qualities, and that's all meaning. So we're fundamentally aesthetic creatures, I'm saying. We have to get aesthetics and bring it back to the center of our lives instead of marginalizing it. And if you do that, what can you do? Now you have a way to talk about meaning with all of the arts, and before you didn't. Now you can talk about painting, sculpture, architecture, dance, music, and aspects of poetry that you couldn't discuss before because they weren't part of necessarily linguistic meaning as we understand it. And I'm saying, therefore, meaning digs down into our visceral engagement with the world. And only by thinking of it in these terms and realizing that it's not just a matter of words. It's not just about concepts and propositions and sentences. Meaning, though that kind of meaning is dependent on this aesthetic embodied meaning. So I want to end with one nice example of this. Oh, what do we got? Many of you will know this. Gene Kelly and Debbie Reynolds and Singing in the Rain. And what I want to see here is, this is my proof text for what I've been saying this morning. And that is, you're going to see someone enacting meaning in the most profound way, not necessarily by what he sings, but by how he sings it. Okay? And it's going to involve emotion at a deep level. The feeling of being alive. The feeling of being energized. The feeling of being in love. That's all meaning, I want to say. So let's take a look at this great piece. It's like,
after he turns away, he shoos away his driver, then he goes, he doodly-doos. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. What? That's meaning. And you know the meaning in the body. It's like, you can't be saying, when you're doodly-do-doing, you can't be saying, everything's bad, the world's going to end, I should kill myself. No. This is fundamental bodily engagement with the meaning of that. And he beautifully enacts doodly-do-doing as he walks down the street. Okay? Then he starts to sing, you might say, and he says, I'm singing in the rain. What does that do to you? I'm singing in the rain. Think body, feel your body. I'm singing in the rain. It lifts you up, right? It's meaningful at that level alone. When you go up, I don't know if it's an octave or whatever it is. And then what does it do? I'm singing in the rain. Da, 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 da. You feel that. Just singing in the rain. And then he says, what a glory. And what is this? Glorious. Notice, glorious. Whoa. And he's open. This is what Damaso would say are background emotions, a kind of fundamental openness to the world. Whereas if you're depressed, you know, your world is dark, narrow, you're closed in, you get a defensive posture, that sort of thing. So let's just look at this part of it one more time, because it's so wonderful, and then we'll stop. So here's the doodly-doo-doo. So I'm saying that Gene Kelly is enacting meaning through the body right now for you as you engage it. I'm singing in the rain, yes, singing in the rain. Now what? Okay, why do we get the meaning of that? The answer to that is mirror neurons. We know that when you engage, when you see another person engaging in certain behaviors, it enacts in your brain and in your chemical system in your body, connected with emotion, similar patterns of movement in the areas of the brain responsible for motor control and movement and emotion. You are actually with the other person in that. And I want to end by saying, and that's why we care about the arts. Because Dewey said that the arts are simply exemplary in enactings of meaning. They show us the possibilities for meaning, ways of being in the world. So that's the notion of meaning I'm trying to present and urge you to consider. It's a meaning that goes beneath language, but also is present in all the time with language and feeds up into language. So I'm saying, and this is the catchphrase that's used today in the work I do, the 4 E's. There's the idea is that cognition and meaning are, people say this about cognition with the 4 E's. But I'm saying it about meaning, too. It is 1, embodied. 2, embedded. Meaning there's no meaning without an environment, a situation. 3, it's enacted. And that's important. It's not that you have, like Gene Kelly has the meaning, and then he expresses it. No, his very body movement enacts the meaning. The 4th E is extended. Mind, they say, is extended into things in the environment, like cultural practices and rituals and signs and computational programs and all of that. And I want to add one more E, the 5th E, and that's emotion. Thing that's been left out. Thank you.